And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of JMU Sound Off. We're coming to you after the Duke's 28-14 loss on the road at Louisville. And the question on likely not only fans' minds today, but also probably some of the players and coaches is what could have been. And we're going to break down all of what happened on Friday night in Louisville later in the show, as well as take a look around the group of five and some of the big games that occurred that will have implications on JMU in the weeks to come. But we're going to also have a conversation with Mike Barber, get his thoughts on what happened in Louisville, but also take us inside the briefing room for what I think is going to be a unique conversation of what that dynamic is like between beat reporters and the people they cover. So you're going to want to hear that right off the top of the show. But we want to start, as we always do, by thanking our sponsors. First of all, Skyline Financial Partners. You can empower your family's life for a lasting financial success. And you can learn more at skylinefinancialpartners.com. Champions Drive Bourbon. Once again, you can get your bottle of Champions Drive Bourbon at select ABC stores across Virginia at abc.virginia.gov. And remember, every bottle that is purchased goes to pursue the championship goals of JMU athletics. We saw a lot of bottles of Champions Drive in Louisville as there was an electric tailgate scene. So good to see people are picking up theirs. Also want to give a shout out to Where's Woody. Remember, you can get 25% off the entire Where's Woody catalog for the 48 hours after every broadcast. You can visit them at where'swoody.com. Visit the Purple Nation store now with a location in Midlothian. I know they have stocked up recently. So if you're somebody who is looking to outfit yourself for the JMU football season, that is the perfect place to go, with stores in not only Midlothian, but the west end of Richmond, as well as in coastal Virginia. Shout out to Shoker Enterprises, the Dead Meat Society. I want to congratulate Dan Everard, who was our Dead Meat Society tailgate winner of the week. Did a great job at the Purple Nation tailgate in Louisville, so appreciate his efforts. If you want to join the movement for grilling enthusiasts, you can visit deadmeatsociety.com. And then finally, our last sponsor, Outdoor Kitchen Creations. If you're looking to take your backyard kitchen to the next level, visit them at backyardtrends.com. And with that, we're going to get right to our guest. First, we're going to bring on Taylor Atkins. Taylor, good to see you. I'm going to bring Mike in right now because everybody wants to hear from him. So they'll hear from us enough later in the show. Joining us now, though, in the Sunbelt studios is Mike Barber. Mike, you formerly obviously a beat reporter for JMU football with the Daily News Record, as well as your great work covering the ACC, Virginia Tech, and UVA at the Richmond Times-Dispatch. I know you still do some sports reporting for the AP and probably a number of other publications that I don't even know about. So thanks for taking some of your Sunday with us. Mike, I want to start right off just getting into what you saw from your perspective as somebody who's covered this team in the past, but also somebody who has a deep history in covering the ACC. Just get your initial thoughts on the game on Friday night.
Yeah, I was really excited for that to be a Friday night game because it kind of gets your undivided attention. I mean, everybody loves the red zone effect of hopping around games on Saturdays and Sundays, but it was pretty cool to have a game that, I still follow JMU really closely, lived in Harrisonburg, covered the Dukes. Obviously the program has become just at another level. So anytime I have a chance to watch great Friday night, Louisville, an ACC opponent, a team that I'm really high on in Louisville. So I was really excited to kind of have a game I could focus in on and not have any distractions outside of, dogs and kids and the usual unavoidable stuff. I was really encouraged by what I saw defensively, certainly from JMU, the way the game started. I think the number one takeaway I had from that game, though, is, I covered JMU back when it was a 1AA program, and they played some games where they played 1A opponents and they played them tough for 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and then they kind of wear down. And that wasn't the case with Friday night in Louisville. Like, I don't want people to get that messed up narrative going where they say, oh, JMU hung with Louisville, but eventually they wear down. Now, JMU is way past that point. And I had a few people say that, like, oh, they hung in there for – no, man, like JMU is a kind of program, the kind of team that can go to Louisville and win a game now. I think what we saw was a great defensive effort from JMU and a disjointed offensive effort. And to go on the road and win a game like that against, a Louisville team that I think is pretty darn good, you can't have a disjointed offensive effort. And we can get into the reasons for that. But that was my big takeaway was, hey, JMU, certainly good enough to play with Louisville, and a complete offensive game. It's a different Friday night. I think if I'm a JMU fan, I'm certainly disappointed to not be able to finish the job considering the way it started. But to me, that was an encouraging effort. And I looked at that and said, man, this is a team that's going to be really hard to beat in conference play.
Well, I want to give you a chance then to get into that disjointed effort. So, and this will go to a theme of what we're going to talk about later in the show. But what were some of the questions you would have asked if you were in that post-game scrum, particularly about the thing that I think is on most people's mind, that quarterback rotation and how that dynamic is not only going to affected this game, but how Coach Chesney sees it going forward. I thought one of the interesting quotes he gave in the run-up to the game that was said on the ESPN broadcast was he addressed front on that both Alonzo Barnett and Matt Sluka are not happy with this rotation, and he kind of met it head on and said, I don't want them to be. So I'm curious how you would have approached, if you were covering that game, what you would have asked.
Yeah, I think the number one thing to consider is, what did you ask all week? Because JMU's done a nice job under Coach Chesney, different maybe than some former coaches. I think the access is pretty good in terms of him being available, him answering questions. So if I have asked him 3 times during the week, are you worried about quarterback chemistry? Then maybe right after a loss, I'm not going to ask him again because you're not getting a different answer. Now, I think, in this case, the way that game unfolded, my number one question would be, are you concerned that the rotation is keeping the offense out of a rhythm? Like, that's number one. And look, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
Obviously, he's, one, not concerned because he made the decision to do it. And 2, probably a little concerned based on the way it played out. So sometimes you're in that tough spot where you know the answer, he knows the answer. What's he supposed to say there? I don't think Bob Chesney believes he's made a mistake by rotating the 2 quarterbacks. I think he believes he's got to figure a way to make that work. And that would have been some way I would have framed the question to give him the chance to say either, hey, I'm committed. I think this is going to work. I want to play both these guys. Or I'd give him the chance to say, hey, now that I saw it out there on the grass, don't love it. Might have to reconsider. All you can do as a reporter, especially in a post game where you're probably only getting 10, 12 minutes, you're limited on your number of questions. I used to get from Virginia Tech fans, man, I'd get these emails and it was like, why didn't you ask about the 3rd and 7 when they went jet sweep? And I'm like, yeah, man, that was a very questionable play call, but I'm going to get 2-3 questions in a post-game scrum. And I don't know that 3rd and 7 jet sweep in the second quarter. Like, I get why you're upset, but it's got to be bigger picture.
And you also understand the dynamic of what they're likely going to say is I haven't watched the tape yet. I mean, how many coaches do you cover in the past say, well, Kurt Signetti famously, I know, would say, well, I really haven't watched anything. I'll have to let you know. And most fans owners, you're going to get another media opportunity Monday or Tuesday. It's fresh. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think people do. Sometimes the emotions are highest right after the game. Yeah. Right. So if you had look at UVA's game. If you have red zone failures in the 4th quarter, that's a big topic. But when I ask about a play call, right there, I'm going to get, we got to go back and see what happened. We felt good about the matchup. Talk to me on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when they've watched the film. And this is where I do think sometimes as sports journalists, we drop the ball. We've got this fire on Saturday of what happened here. And by the time Tuesday comes around, maybe we forgot and we've moved on to the feature of the week. I think it's important to come back and for JMU's case, hey, talk to Bob Chesney about, hey, now that you've reviewed the film, how do you feel about this quarterback rotation? Is it working? Are you calling the right plays with the right guys in the game? Those kind of things. It's okay to nail into that and to dig into that, but understand that everybody wants it after the game because they're fired up. You're not going to get a good answer after the game.
Well, okay, so this question is going to follow up on that, and it may be a lot of the same answer. I'm going to preface this with, the Barstool JMU account. I love those guys. They're one of the biggest JMU accounts on here. I think they bring a lot of national attention because they interact with other schools. But, a tweet that they had after the game last night, and I'll read it from them. It says, since no one on the JMU media team asked the hard questions and will likely say good try tonight, maybe we should have the Barstool JMU guys get media credentials so we can ask the hard questions. And again, I love the account. I love the guys that run it. But talk a little bit about that because they weren't the only ones asking that questions. There's a lot of people about why is the JMU media asking a bunch of softball questions and no one will ask the hard questions. Kind of address that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've gotten that through, I think I'm a guy who asks pretty hard questions. I think that's kind of my reputation. Not everyone loves it, but I've gotten through my career. Why did you let so-and-so off the hook? And it's not the courtroom scene at the end of A Few Good Men, right? Like you get your question, and sometimes if you're a bully, you can get a follow-up right away. But if the coach doesn't want to answer, he doesn't want to answer. I always point people to Virginia Tech was having an awful offensive season, and they were going into a bye week. And I asked Justin Fuente, I said, are you going to consider during the bye week changing play callers? You're an offensive coach. Would you take over play calling? And he lost his mind on me. He said, that's the most ludicrous crap I've ever heard. And, it became a whole flap. And I thought, honestly, even though that fans loved it, fans were like, oh, that was a good, tough question. Well, was it a tough question, though? I mean, your offense was bad. And I said to you, do you consider making a change of play caller? I think it's a softball question, because if you're Justin Fuente, you can, one, stump for your guy. You could say, no, I believe in Brad Cornelison. He's the guy. That's a stupid question. We're moving forward with Brad. I think that's a strong answer. You can say, hey, I want this team to be more productive and successful. Everything's on the table. That's an answer that the fans are going to like. Him losing his temper with me was the only answer that was going to make him the bad guy. And it was the way he went. So sometimes I think fans, they're looking for that gotcha question. But like, what would you ask Bob Chesney? I'd love to ask the Barstool guys, like, what was the question you wanted to know? Do you regret the way the offense performed? Yeah, of course he does. Like, it's not, to me, that's not a big time question. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I'll follow up to that because again, I personally have so much appreciation for you because I was coming up as a fan, both at school and working there when you were covering JMU, when a program like JMU, other than your coverage, it wasn't getting any. So, social media was still young. We were FCS. So you gave really the nation's first view of this JMU program that has become what it is. But you've also been around other big programs. You followed college sports. You followed college football in particular. And so I guess the one kind of question that, objectively, there's just not a lot of examples that really anyone can think of the two quarterback system working. And I know it was kind of hit on in the press conference afterwards. So do you think that the questioning about the 2 QB play was the appropriate amount? Would you have done something different? Or, is there any more that could have been gleaned out of that press conference directly after the game that was left on the table, I guess?
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I don't think they left any meat on the bone that they were going to get. Now, what I'd love to see is just what you referenced. Let's come back with a bunch of stories this week of why does Bob Chesney think this will work? Let's look at some of the things he did at Holy Cross, where he did have some moments where he played two guys and it worked. But let's look nationally, historically. It's not been a good system. It's not worked well. It's been okay. And I think if you go back and dive into Holy Cross, it's been okay when you play a guy in certain packages. He's your goal line quarterback, right? We've seen Florida have success with that over the years. But the idea of having two guys who are both your starting quarterback and you kind of run different sets and you shuffle them in and out, to me, disjointed is the word I keep coming back to. But for a journalist, for a sports writer, it's less about, pinning Bob Chesney up against the wall and saying, why are you doing this? He's already told you why he's doing it. He's already told you what he thinks. Now you go in and dive into the numbers. Show me teams that have been successful. How has it worked? Show me teams that haven't been successful. Why doesn't it work? It's just the idea that you're going to grab him after the game and grill him and you're going to have some, Hollywood moment where he breaks down and says, you're right, Mike Barber, I'm going to stop playing two quarterbacks. Like, that's not the way it works.
Well, Mike, can I ask you though, because this is another element that I don't think as many people understand now is not only has the dynamic shifted in the briefing room with how the SID role and the way they manage that relationship, but many of these coaches now are media trained. They know how to block and bridge like professional spokespeople. Can you talk about how that shifted and how that's changed that dynamic between reporter and wherever the subject of the interview that you're covering is?
Yeah, everything's changed, right? If you guys go back to when I was covering Mickey Matthews, it was a totally different dynamic and it was starting to shift. And I think, honestly, I struggled with it. And I think Mickey at times struggled with it. It's probably why we had some of the blowups we had. Number one, and we talked off air about this, but number one is, hey, all these schools want free content for their website. Yeah. So they started streaming these press conferences. So now, instead of me being able to maybe dig in and ask the tough question, if I do that on your live stream, now I'm showing you up in a sense. It's like the major league hitter who covers his mouth when he's cussing at the umpire. so it doesn't show up on the TV, right? Tape. You've put reporters in a situation where any question I ask is on the stream. Now, that doesn't bother me, right? Like, I don't mind coming off a press conference and having my Twitter full of, dude, you're a jerk. Why do you go after coach like that?
In this journalism era, it's actually good for you.
Yeah, it probably does, right? It builds a following. But what did bother me is there were times I wanted to ask Mickey Matthews a question that I didn't want advertised to everybody. Yeah. That I was saying, hey, I heard this, or I think this. Explain to me why you do this. And when I ask a question on a live stream, you've essentially published it, right? The whole world can hear it. And Mickey can come back and give you a great answer and say, hey, this is what I was thinking. This is why and I might in my head say, that's a good answer. I'm not going to pursue this any further. I get why this is, but it's too late. It's out there now. And so I think that puts coaches and reporters in a weird spot. Number two, social media, all of that, image, how quickly coaches get fired. Look, I mean, there's some things that happen behind the scenes that if it happened these days, it would get a coach fired. A different time. Yeah. But so I think coaches are more careful. I think they're more guarded. And I think they've been put in a situation where the relationship is on public display instead of the way it used to be, which was, text a coach, call a coach, get their thoughts. Now you only get them in your set window and everything you say is published on the website.
Interesting. So I want to, for that perspective though, talking about that relationship with Mickey, because I think at the time, those back and forths that I think kind of, maybe built up your lore in JMU world as being this, hard-nosed reporter, which you are, but I think, again, the visual of it was different. Mickey has told me and has said that was at the time mutually beneficial because JMU needed people in the stands. He said, he loved that back and forth that he had with you. Maybe not all the time, but it was something that, he would throw out those quotes and say some things because he knew it would get the coverage that would help grow the attention and the awareness of this program. But at the time, I thought it was great for you and helped you younger in your career, kind of build the brand that would take you to the places you are now in your work with some of the national publications and everything else that you've done.
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of the public facing stuff, I don't want to say an act because it's never an act, right? I'm always asking a real question. He's always given a real answer. But yeah, I think Mickey liked to ham it up and I wasn't the kind to back down. So it made for good theater. I think that part did help both of us. I think people enjoyed me interacting with Mickey and Mickey interacting with me. There were some times in private where there were some explosions that you were like, okay, nobody's here. This is just two dudes and you are very angry. And I think that's okay too, man. Like, I like the healthiness of that relationship. I used to laugh I always knew that if Mickey didn't like my article that day, I'd come to practice and he would stand on the opposite side of the field from me.
I remember
and
that.
He would basically ignore me and avoid me for half the practice. And then all of a sudden he would come across the field, like make a beeline, and he'd get to me and he'd put his left shoulder right into my chest and he'd like lean on me and he'd say, Barber, I thought your article today was garbage. And sometimes it was more colorful terms. I don't know what you guys like on the pod.
Trust me, you can say anything.
So I'd say, well, what part of my article was crap? And he would say, I thought the whole thing was crap. And then we'd have a little back and forth about it. And then he'd turn and face the field and he'd ask me if the Yankees won the night before, because I'm a big Yankees fan. And then the rest of the day was fine. And we'd go back about it. And I like that. I like that better than a coach quietly brooding and telling everybody, I don't like the beat writer. It's a different time, man. And to your point, JMU was trying to grow the product. And I mean, Mickey said to me 100 times, he said, if I didn't have to sell tickets, I wouldn't let you near my team, which was, a very nice thing to say. But yeah, it helped everybody. And it certainly helped grow JMU to be on the front page every day.
Well, can I ask another thing? And this isn't related to this season, so I want to be very careful to not even get specifics. But there was a back and forth online in previous seasons during the Curt Cignetti era of, people were not happy that the beat reporters were not revealing who the starting quarterback was at the time, or were not revealing specific lineup decisions from there in practice. And somebody actually, kind of stood on the stairs and looked into the stadium and saw it. I don't want to necessarily address that specific case, but more importantly, the balance that does exist at all levels of sports with beat reporters is that you are provided access to a product that, again, as you said with Mickey, they really don't want to give you because of the competitive intelligence it can provide. So how you strike that balance between what you're ethically allowed to report and what you ultimately put into the publication, because I know there's things I'm sure you've seen that you could have printed, but you didn't because of a number of different dynamics. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and it's hard and it's ever changing.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, I remember JMU was getting ready to play West Virginia. I think it was 04, actually, the year that they won the first title. And they were going to run a flea flicker on the first play. And they practiced it all week. And at the end of the week, one of the coaches came over and said, "Hey, you're not going to put this in the paper, right? Because we're going to call that, if we get the right field position, we're going to call that on the first offensive snap." And I said, "No." I said, "I'm never going to, what's the advantage to me of spoiling your first play call? Like, there's no news value to that." Now, what it does is, because I saw it all week, when they run that play, I can come back the next week with a really cool story.
Yeah.
How did JMU put together the flea flicker they hit West Virginia with, that kind of a thing. Then there's other times that it's a little more dicey, right? You see somebody get injured, and that was a big change that came out of Texas and Mac Brown. Mac always said he had a kid break his leg, and the kid's parents found out on social media before Mac could ever call him. And he cut out social media, cut down access at practice. So that's tough, right? Injuries are big news, but there's a human factor there. Like, how quickly should you report those kind of things? And then, of course, in 04 was the big question of who was going to be the starting quarterback. And that probably led to the biggest blowups between Coach and I. But it was pretty obvious watching practice that Justin Riscotti was going to be the starter and Matt Lizotte was not. But he would not make that announcement. And the way I played it was, that's the way I wrote it in my story. I said, in practice, Riscotti's getting 60% of the snaps. Matthew said he's not committed to a starter yet. Lizotte has been a 3-year starter, so maybe he needs less prep time. Look, we all knew what was going to happen, but you got to thread that needle of, you want to give readers what they want, but do you want to give readers what they want so bad on Wednesday afternoon that you're willing to sacrifice your access the rest of the season? No, of course not.
Yeah.
Well, kind of to that point, you're talking about game prep, and I want to give a shout out to our friend Chase Kitty. He's a great follow on X. If you're a JMU fan, you don't follow him, but he made a point after the game. He had a nice long thread. One of the points I took out of there was, you saw last year the way we game planned for UNC was a specific game plan to UNC, and you really didn't see it continue throughout the year. And he said, one possibility is the game plan that you saw for U of L for Louisville was the game plan for Louisville, and not exactly, even a shell of what it may or may not look like the rest of the season. So specifically in your covering of JMU and other teams, when they've kind of played, because Louisville's that outlier game on our schedule, it's different than all the other games. Have you seen, is that a good potential scenario that could have happened where, everyone's getting really frustrated because it's like, this will never work all season. And it's like, well, no one's particularly saying that this one game is the entire rest of the season.
Yeah. We have two great examples of that. Number one is JMU beating Virginia Tech with the pistol formation.
Right.
Yep. And that's an example of, we all saw the pistol, there's two of us covering the team, but we saw the pistol, and, coach was like, "Hey, how about, let's not emphasize the fact that we slid the running back behind the quarterback." Like, that's fair. Like, we're not there to give away trade secrets. But that's a great example of a game plan that helps you win a game. And the other one is Virginia Tech when they beat Ohio State. And Bud Foster banned us from practice. We could not come to the end of spring. We couldn't come to scrimmages. And then they play Ohio State. And what do? They come out in that bear front that nobody expected. Nobody was ready for. They shock Ohio State. And that's an example where, one reporter saying, "Hey, Virginia Tech is prepping a bear front, a different odd look," that could have prepared, could have changed the whole scenario. So on the one hand, I tend to say, like, these coaches are a little overinflated. They're not reinventing the wheel. On the other hand, if you're about to play Virginia Tech and unveil the pistol, if you're about to play at Ohio State and you're going to unveil the bear front that you've never put on film, maybe you should keep things a little secret.
Yeah, and again, it changed the ripple effect of these types of interviews. If something goes bad in one place, all these coaches know each other. They all have the same agents. It has an effect, and other programs are going to shut down. And I think that is such an important point for where to shift it, because your point is so true about what those original press conferences when I was a freshman at JMU covering the team with a breeze, watching you do your work. The dynamic shift from where it is today is impossible to overstate. And that's before you get into the 100 of podcasts like ours that cover the team and whatever that dynamic is like now. And the different levels of professionalism that people would bring to those scrums has really shifted everything. So I want to give you one last chance. So just to, if you were going into this week covering this team, what would the focus of your articles be? Is there something you would want to know or an angle you would be taking? I liked what your point about broadening it back to how they ran this offense at Holy Cross and maybe looking at what's coming to the country, but in other parts of the country who have done this with other teams. But is there another angle you might be, gearing up for? We haven't talked about the defense yet because there's a positive side of what they did, stopping a team that's loaded with some potential NFL draft picks. There's some positive angles to cover as well.
Yeah, and it's funny. My brain never shifts out of this mode of I watch a game and then what would my next 3 stories be? So when I watch that JMU game, number one, is the quarterback, the 2-quarterback system. Where are you going to go with that? Number 2 is the defense. How good was the defense? How did it contain maybe the best running back in the ACC for a lot of that game?
Heisman candidate potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought that was really encouraging and the kind of thing that translates. If you can do that against that offense, really well-coached offense, really talented on the road, that's going to translate through your conference play. So to me, it's concern about quarterback, hype in the defense. And then the third thing is I'd go back and take a look in JMU's history when they've played some of these marquee non-conference matchups and it hasn't gone their way. What has that equaled? Because my personal experience was that it was not a bad moment. I mean, 2004, West Virginia. Yeah. I remember them saying the players went to West Virginia thinking they could win that game. And some people laughed, you were never going to beat West Virginia. Well, they went on and won a national championship that year. So what does a game like this that you've played competitive, but you kind of get your heart breaking a little bit and your fans are frustrated, what does that spin into? So that's another topic that if I were still there, I'd be diving into.
Yeah, I think that's a great angle, and maybe some people listening will take that angle. But Mike, I do want to just give you a chance to wrap up because you're doing some great work now. A little bit of a different focus than what your typical JMU fans may understand your work is like. Tell us about your new role in Charlottesville and how can people follow your stuff.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. I took over about 2.5 months ago as the editor-in-chief at CvilleRightNow.com. We're a hyper-local news site, no paywall, no subscription. We try to focus on really Charlottesville, Albemarle, surrounding counties, and local issues. So a lot of local politics, local education, crime, economic issues that are really local to the people who live in the area. I still get to cover Virginia football and basketball, so that keeps my hand in things. And that's been nice. In fact, I'm working on a Sunday column right now. But yeah, really it's about if you live in the 434 area, the Charlottesville, Albemarle, those surrounding counties, it's the news that you need, and we're trying to give it to you and do it for free. Because I know there's been a big thing about, hey, it's the first time in my career in a long time I'm not behind a paywall. So it's kind of exciting for me.
Mike, can I ask you one unrelated question? How did you get into the restaurant business in Harrisonburg back in the day? I never ever heard an answer that I was confident was true. So, because I did love your spot.
Yeah, there were a lot of urban legends about that. But I'm a big food guy. I have a dream of a restaurant maybe when I retire. But a buddy of mine who owns Chanella's Pizza, he had the idea, found the spot, and was like, "Hey, let's do something." I had just decided, you know what? I'm going to cover JMU for the next 30 years. That's going to be my career. I love it. I enjoy it. The fan base is great. The program's growing. So we agreed, all right, we're going to do this. Now it's a side project, so keeps me in the area. And then as soon as we signed the papers to open the corner, I got a call from the editor at the Richmond Times-Dispatch and said, "Oh, wow. Hey, we want you to come cover Virginia Tech." And I thought, man, what terrible timing. But yeah, it was just, I love the restaurant business. I love food. That's my hobby. I cook all the meals in our family. And I'd love to do it again. But I've learned one big lesson. It is a very full-time job. And being a sports writer or a journalist is a very full-time job. You can't do both together.
Exactly. Well, it was a great spot, and stay tuned, dude. There could be a restaurant in the Charlottesville future. Maybe in Harrison. Maybe it's a franchise. Who knows? Mike, thanks again for sharing your time. Your voice is incredibly valuable in this space, and just personally, I want to say you were very, very good to young journalists and people who aspired to even have their toes dipped in the water of covering sports. And that was something I always really appreciated about you and how you conducted yourself, the best of what this profession should be. And I know that while you're not full-time in sports now, I have a feeling that your last chapter has not been written in this space, and hopefully the industry allows for people with your skill set to continue to thrive and do what they do, because it's needed now, I believe, just as much as it ever has been in the past.
Well, thank you for that. I certainly love the work, and it's having interactions like this that kind of make it special.
All right. Well, and I'll keep sending you press releases for the Red Cross so we can get that story in there too.
Appreciate it. I love it.
Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Awesome discussion. Man, again, I can't overstate the value that Mike brought to the beat at a time when JMU needed reporters to give this program the attention it deserved, but also just that dynamic again that provided such a level of professionalism to the program, and its kind of rise to where it is today. And I think it's
legend.
You can't overstate the impact that it had, and the stories that came out of that 04 season and the aftermath of it are things that I know shaped me and shaped my fandom. But also what you said, Taylor, there weren't 1,000 blogs, there weren't 100 podcasts that you can follow. Like, if you were somebody, especially who didn't live in Harrisonburg, your view of this program and everything that was going on, it was shaped by Mike and a few other voices. It was impressive.
Yeah. I mean, the coverage was basically the CAA zone message boards posting Mike's articles and then debating them. I mean, that was the entire way you got content for JMU football and really JMU sports in general. So he's a legend, and I think the perspective he just gave, I don't know if anyone could have offered a more unique, more experienced, more veteran perspective, particularly on the topic of the JMU football program than him.
Yeah,
so I'm glad he
I will
came
say
on.
in the early, well, we all had those the cell phones, you could flip a keyboard out and you have to type what was the 3 letters. We couldn't text the articles to each other, but we were on the JMU eFullNet system, I guess, emailing articles back while we were still students. But it was a fun time. And again, appreciate Mike. And again, I think we're going to see many articles in the future from him on JMU. And he did a great job while he was doing some coverage for JMU as well in the last year. It was awesome to see. But Taylor, now I want to kind of shift the discussion to our thoughts on the game on Friday night. Obviously, I was in Louisville for not only the game, but the lead up to the game. And I did want to start with a positive, because there were a couple things that before we get to the actual game, I think merit really bringing up is, first of all, the Duke Club tailgate event at the Last Refuge. We put a video out on our social channels just highlighting what an incredible venue that was. But that is part of the story too, because road trips are always special when you go to see this team on the road, and we've got so many more opportunities for fans to travel to see JMU. As they make their way through the Sun Belt this year, we have a game in 2 weeks at Liberty. I would just encourage you to make that trip because you're going to have a great experience. Win, lose, draw, something in the middle. So shout out to the Duke Club. I also want to give a shout out to Purple Nation. Hosted a tremendous tailgate at a hotel that was in the kind of the shadows of L&N Federal Credit Union Stadium. I made a walk across the bridge while some other Dukes went to a Kroger right around the stadium. We bought like $350 worth of burgers and hot dogs and brats. The hotel that was right there did a tremendous job setting it up. And it was just great because we had so many people who made the trip there that hadn't been to a JMU game in a while. We saw some faces who had been really at every one of the away games we've been at. It was just a special lead up to the game, and the whole tailgate scene before in the parking lots was also great. So shout out to JMU Nation for, again, not only making the trip, but showing the nation on national TV that our fan base belongs in this discussion, that we do show up in a big way because it matters. That helps to round out the story. But Taylor, you had the ability to watch the game with some fans back here in Virginia. I want to give you just an opportunity to give your initial thoughts, and then we can kind of go back and forth on the different ways that this game kind of played out, because there's multiple different ways we could kind of approach it.
Yeah, and I think, well, how do I say this? I have a good buddy, John Butler, who we're going to bring on here in a minute. And, one of the things that he always does after some of these games, especially the day after, is he's like, I've slept on it, and here's a couple of good points. And so I think it's important that I thought, particularly after this game, it being 48 hours removed from it now, that the we've slept on it aspect of this game was important. So John is a good friend of mine. I met him my freshman year at JMU. He is someone that's probably there's more purple in his blood. I think he has 30, 40, something extended family members that have gone through JMU. His father was the legendary president of the Fredericksburg Duke Club, and was one of the first things that got me into tailgating when I was in school there. His uncle Gary is a Hall of Fame basketball player for the Dukes, and so John knows JMU, and I always appreciate kind of his day after thoughts. So let's go ahead and bring on John Butler here, and what he was going to do kind of so we can go through this game is John. We really haven't gone through these yet. I think you had a couple points that you wanted to talk to John and I about, and I thought John and I could kind of react to these because I think you bring a perspective that is not, it's not all rosy and purple. I think you bring some realistic criticism to it, but I think you also bring a perspective that brings some optimism and some reasons to still be positive going forward. So, John McNamara, I don't know if you have any other things before.
No, I think this is good because I have a feeling John's thoughts are going to mirror a lot of the rest of the fan base, and then probably in a lot of ways because we're all on the same kind of group chats, and that's what this podcast really came out of. Is let's take those group chats and bring them to the podcast format, because what we're going to talk about on here is what we're all sharing in our private messages after Friday night's game. So, John, let's go through kind of point by point. What's your first takeaway now that you've slept on it? I know you didn't sleep too well last night. You had a little bit of a stomach bug. But so first of all, product and credit to you for being able to get back off the turf and show some resilience. But what's your first point?
Appreciate that, John. So, after getting a chance to sleep on it, and this will come to no surprise to anyone that watched the game, my first point was the defense. There's really no additional commentary required. They dominated that game to an extent that I'm not even sure I thought they were capable of against an ACC opponent. I think truly, especially looking at some of the statistics and the way they got spread around across the players, that we have an opportunity to really take over some games in the Sun Belt this year with the remainder of the schedule.
Well, I want to bounce off that because there were a couple of players that just stood out to me in such a manageable and big way. First of all, DJ Barksdale, that pursuit that he had to a player I know made a lot of national attention. Yeah. Some accounts on X and other places kind of sharing it, and the impact that he had was tremendous. Jacob Thomas continues to just be an absolute star in the secondary for this unit. Elijah Culp, I thought, also really showed that he is going to be a force for this defense. You look at our linebacker Trent Hedrick performing well again. Emmanuel Bush was an absolute monster on the defensive line for this team, and that rotation on the DL was also impactful because I felt like our defense looks fresh in that game. And again, this is not just an ACC offense. This is an ACC offense with a Heisman candidate running back, a quarterback in Miller Moss who garnered a tremendous amount of attention in the lead up to this game, as well as a stable of wide receivers who are also near the top of the ACC in terms of the talent they bring. So to be able to do what we do, I thought was incredibly impressive, and is particularly exciting when you look across the Sun Belt and some of the offensive struggles we saw from teams in this league. I really still feel like the roadmap to all of our goals that we had before this season is still in front of us based on what this unit is going to allow this team to do in terms of staying competitive in every game that we're going to play. Taylor, do you have any thoughts on the defense?
Well, I'm a stats guy, and watching the game, I had the same impression you did. Matter of fact, every time the offense, if we went 4 and out, had to punt or something like that, there was part of me that's like, all right, let's just go ahead and get this next, 3 and out done so the offense can get the ball back. There wasn't a concern like, oh no, we have to stop them again, because you eventually got to the point in the game where I just had so much confidence in the offense. And so to break down some of the numbers, the 264 yards of offense, I mean, to hold this Louisville team, which is a top third, preseason ACC team. And I think the reason that they've been getting so much notoriety is because of their offensive attack. To hold them to 264 yards, only one team all of last year held them to fewer yards. Clemson, I think, held them to 241 yards last year, but every other game. So, I mean, this would be one of their lowest offensive productions in the last couple of years. But I think also a note, when you talk about they had 113 yards of rushing, but there was that 78-yard run that we had in one play, kind of a breakdown in coverage. And so you strip that away, and the remaining rushing yards they had for the rest of the game were 35 yards. They were averaging 1.2 yards a carry. I think that's incredibly impressive. The passing game, 151 yards. That's a low stat to start off with, but you had a 64-yard pass, which again was a busted coverage. So you take away those two plays, and you're looking at 35 yards of total offense rushing, 87 yards of total yards passing, against what is considered one of the better, if not one of the best offenses in the ACC. And for our defense to go out there and dominate, I don't like John said, there's not a lot of other than to really harp on just how great of a defensive performance that was. There's not much else to really say.
Last point on the though, because I do think the thing that, first of all, the hill I'm going to die in is in that long touchdown reception that Louisville had. If you go back and watch that play, and Coach Chesney hinted at it in the postgame, I think JMU fans have an argument that there was an illegal block that was thrown that allowed him to kind of skirt as long as he did. So I'm not going to hold that against us as much, but there is a swagger about this defense. We talked about it after seeing Weber State, and just the confidence that this group has. They just seem like they are alignment is a word we've used in a number of contexts so far in the season, but there just seems to be a cohesion in this group under Coach Hischler that just feels different than, we've had some tremendous defenses in the past, but there's just something about this group that they seem to like rise to the moment and revel in the ability to be disruptive. They were in the backfield all night long, tackles for a loss or something that they were really priding themselves on. They said in their unit meetings and stuff they were going to do, but to see it play out now 2 weeks in a row against a Weber State team and now against the best offense we are going to face this year, I don't even think that's debatable. Has to have fans who are maybe a little down after what happened Friday night. If you're looking for a reason to be optimistic, I can't think of anything, that should pump you up more than this, because it was impressive to see. And I know, John, you had a stat that you wanted to kind of reference related to that.
Yeah, and you almost beat me to it, but going across the scheme with our new defensive coordinator and just how well the team played as a unit, 8 tackles for loss spread across 7 different players.
Great stat.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Well, John,
well, and
awesome.
And also let's break down that 28 points again. 2 busted plays. Yeah. One, arguably the penalty should have been called. Another touchdown was the fumble in the end zone, which was not a product of their offense. And then you held them to 2 field goals. So realistically, you take away those 2 busted plays, there was not a drive they put together. This team wasn't scoring they weren't having touchdown producing drives. It was 2 busted plays, a fumble in the end zone. We held that offense really to those 2 field goals.
Yeah. All right, John, let's give you your second point from this left on it.
And I will preface number 2 with I am rocking a number 14 jersey this afternoon.
Yeah.
So my view on the game, I think Barnett looks like he's still trying to find his rhythm a little bit this year in 2025. Downfield passing has been a bit inconsistent. And if you look at the statistics of the receivers that are completing passes, everybody's at that 10 yards and closer to the line of scrimmage yard range. I also noticed that I don't see maybe as many runs or designed runs as I would have expected so far into the season. I know it's only been 2 games, but in my point of view, I thought I saw a few opportunities for Barnett to maybe take advantage of a few openings that were there that didn't happen. Maybe it's Louisville's defense, maybe it's something else, but that's just my observations after Friday night's game.
Yeah. To that point, my slept on it aspect of that is when I went back and kind of rewatched some of the game. For anyone that DVR'd it, they opened the game with showing Alonzo Barnett highlights, and they show Alonzo throwing on the run, they show him making tight passes and tight windows, they show him doing everything he did last year. 26 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. I've seen Alonzo be the quarterback that has gotten him all these preseason accolades. But to John's point, have I seen that this year yet? No. And while I'm a guy that does a podcast and we're talking about, coaches who have 2 decades plus of coaching experience, I'm not going to try to, assume I know what and why. I do think the whole inconsistency of him being taken in, put out of the game, I as a podcaster and a fan, I think that has to wear on a player, and I want to attribute a little bit of that to it. And then also, you're coming off an injury. He probably didn't have the same fall camp that a normal quarterback would have. I don't know if that's playing a factor, but those 2 things, there's obviously reasons why I think we're seeing some of that hesitancy and some of not the old playing that we saw last year. And so, yeah, to John's point, I'm kind of curious to see where that goes as the season progresses.
I want to react to that because I think this is my view of all of life, not just sports, is that, there's a push now in so many aspects of life for things to be black and white issues. Whereas I think that the truth in many of these situations is so many shades of gray, and it's so nuanced. And anytime somebody says, well, the quarterback play is X, it's not good enough, it's great, it's the reason we're winning. There's so many factors that play into that. The offensive line, for example, I don't think when they're looking at the tape this Sunday is going to look at it and say they had their best performance. There were multiple situations where whoever was in at quarterback, they were in the backfield the second the ball was snapped. So that there's an offensive line element to it. There's also a coaching element to this. I do not think that this rotation, as much as Coach Chesney and the staff say that this is what it has to be, and I believe that was a quote from the postgame, is saying this is what it has to be going forward, is putting these guys in the best position possible to be successful. Having Alonza come in on third down in obvious passing situations, that is going to allow these defenses to be able to pin their ears back and come at him with a full tilt blitz. And that is going to be particularly hard for any quarterback to deal with, especially when you're dealing with a defensive front like what Louisville was able to deploy. So I think, while I agree with both of what you said about, is Alonza still finding his rhythm? I think the answer to that question likely is yes, but is he being put in the best possible position to find that rhythm? Is Matthew Sluka being in the best possible position to be successful? Because the other side of the coin is, if Matthew comes in on first and second down and 80 to 90% of the plays they have built in for him are running plays, that means the defense can stack the box, and it's going to make it harder for him to be successful as well. So I hope, and I do still have a tremendous amount of confidence in this, coaching staff and what their capabilities are. I do hope going into this bye week, there's a little bit more reflection on the way this is rolled out, and hopefully that there are plays put into this playbook and into this scheme that are going to set up somebody like Alonza for success. So if he is somebody who's struggling on a 3-step drop and being able to handle the blitz, I hope we would see more bootlegs or more short passes, which, to their credit, there was some of in the second half of that game, where we did some of the wide receiver screens and things that are ultimately going to take some of the pressure off the quarterback. I'd like to see some traditional screens, brought into this offense as well, to maybe keep the defense honest. But I just think that there are so many layers to this that, for me personally, it's just too early to have a firm definition, on my view at least, on where we currently stand at quarterback.
Yeah, and John, you kind of beat me to it there on point 3 of my observations after sleeping on the game, was just that, the 2 quarterback system and the back and forth. That was really, from my point of view, and some questions I have, does it impact prep time leading up, splitting reps between the 2 individuals, the different formations and schemes? As Mike alluded to during your segment with him, and that was the first thing I thought of, was back to the old Tim Tebow days, when you had baby Tebow coming in as a true freshman, when it was first and goal, not necessarily second and 7 after a handoff, and then you switch to a new quarterback, and then it's 3rd and 7, and then you're going back to Alonza for a passing down in an obvious passing situation, kind of like what you alluded to. So that went to my point number 3. Kind of beat me to it there.
Well, yeah. and to that point, I kind of talked a little bit about this with Mike earlier. Was is this an extended tryout between the 2 quarterbacks? Was this specific to the game plan at Louisville? I've never seen it be successful. I know there were a lot of people on, even outside of the JMU bubble. I mean, you got to the 3rd or 4th quarter, and the guys calling the game, they were audibly laughing at some point.
They're saying it's hard enough to be a quarterback in Division I football alone when you're not being given a chance to even have one drive to yourself. That was what I thought was really
so. I think the fans' frustration is it's kind of seeing, what is the point? What is the outcome of this? And also in a game where we saw that this was a great opportunity for JMU to really make an impact, kind of to that next level with this season. I think too often we get trapped in the binary of arguing, and this is where I think a lot of the confrontation comes between JMU fans. Is there's 2 things at play. There's the JMU standard, which I don't think this game met. But then there's also the fact that, other than maybe 4 or 5 other G5 programs, I think we're in a better position than the other 90% of the G5. And so that doesn't make not reaching the JMU standard okay. But I think sometimes one side is arguing we're still in a better position than almost all of the G5. And the other side is arguing, but this did not meet what the JMU standard and JMU expectation is. And I think both points are valid.
Yeah. To address your question though, John, about is it, preventing them in terms of limiting their prep time and things. I don't know how the answer to that question would be anything, but yes, there are only a certain number of reps in a game week that your starting quarterback is going to get. So when you have 2, that not only impacts the reps that they're going to individually get, but it's how many reps these wide receivers are going to have with their quarterback. It is just a dynamic that creates multiple challenges. I'm not saying these 2 quarterbacks are not up to the challenge. I'm also not saying that these coaches aren't up to the challenge of making it work. I just do think it is a fair and legitimate criticism that not only fans are having, but many members of the media are starting to ask is this the best way for this team to reach their ultimate goal? Is it sustainable? Can Sluka handle the wear and tear that's going to come from being consistently hit 20 to 25 times in a game at the FBS level? I think that is an open-ended question. It is different than what he would be facing in terms of the size of the players that are he's playing against than he was at Holy Cross. So I think that is definitely a fair open-ended question that this coaching staff is going to face as they go throughout this week and in the weeks to come, if this is truly the way that they're going to roll it out. I will say I do think there is a fair other question related to this rotation. It is, when Coach Chesney and the staff went out and got Matthew Sluka and Camden Coleman, there was likely the belief that Alonzo Barnett would not be ready to play early on in this season. So there is a human element to this as well. I don't want to infer or insinuate in any way, shape, or form that we have inside information to understand how that dynamic is at play. But he does have a history with Matthew Sluka and how, does that play into what this dynamic is going forward in the future of this quarterback rotation. So it's definitely something that I know not only we're going to be watching, but everyone who's associated with this team will likely be focused on, definitely at least this week and in the weeks to come. So John, your next point.
Sure. And you already alluded to this a little bit during our last observation. Was another one I had was that the offensive line really struggled against the speed rush of Louisville's defense. And that may have alluded to some of the issues that Alonzo and Matt Sluka both ran into. But that was another observation I had watching the game, was that speed rush, and especially on their defensive tackles on the inside, really seemed to give our interior offensive line a lot of fits.
Yeah, I want to say one point of the offensive line, hopefully we'll get some answers early, is that there were some offensive linemen that went down with injuries in the game. I know Pat McMurtry had a scare. He did come back to the game. So that was one of the questions we raised in the preseason, was if there was an area of concern for this team was depth on the offensive line. I think that's going to be tested as we now get into the heart of our schedule with obviously our Group of 5 game against Liberty, and then what we have in the meat of the Sun Belt. But that is an open-ended question that we're going to have to keep our eyes on, because it's going to ultimately be a key to the team's success. And if hopefully we can protect our quarterbacks better, but also hopefully fuel the running game and this great stable of backs we have.
Yeah, rewatching the game, I feel like the D-line was in the backfield almost simultaneously as the ball was snapped. I think the O-line, there's some work that needs to be done there, but that was by far the best defensive line we're going to have. The offensive line was banged up, so I'm not too worried going forward. It's still early in the season. I expect that O-line to be very productive, especially when you saw him put up 313 rushing yards the week before against Weber State.
All right.
Another observation that carries over a little bit from Weber with that block last week, but I have a little bit of concern with the low trajectory on the field goal kick. I know that was something I picked up in the broadcast, that when we're out there for a field goal, it seems to be a bit of a low kicker with our new kick this year. And I jokingly pointed out to Taylor that the new punter this year, I wish I could put that much backspin on my irons when I'm out on the links.
Yes. Yeah, I mean the special team side, and John, you said this off air. It hasn't been as bad as it can be. It hasn't been as good as it can be, and it's one of those things where if we don't see continued improvement, we're going to get ourselves in trouble this year, where the special teams is going to come down and it's going to define the game. And right now, I don't think we're on the side where I would be fully confident in that being the defining factor to help us win that game.
Can I make one point on special teams from a positive, though? If there is a positive to take away from what I've seen early on, is that I do think our kickoff coverage has been very good. And I also want to give credit to our kickoff returners and punt returners who have done a good job at the very least fielding kicks. There were some tough kicks in that game that they were able to make sure at the very least don't go the wrong way. We are blocking our punts better in terms of not letting people get to that. Some of that is also with Patrick Ray being able to really go to the left or the right with being an Australian style kicker. But Coach Chesney, was very blunt in the postgame saying this was a kicking issue on that one that went, I think, 5 to 6 yards. I don't know what the final stat was, but I agree it is an area that I've no doubt, knowing Coach Kanan and how focused he is on this, that it's not up to his standard yet. But if there's a positive there as well, we're not going to see another group like Liberty against Louisville this year, because remember, that's an area where typically you do see a significant advantage in special teams is when you're playing these Power 4 teams, the quality of player that they do have on this unit. Chase Regan continues to also be for us just an absolute monster.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, all right, John, your next point.
Sure. So, and these next few are really teamed together, and they're really more of a statement to not be so negative, but to be positive. I think the coaches will figure it out during the bye week. Personally, when it comes to the quarterback situation, I have every expectation that they will figure it out. They will make adjustments. They've got a full week to tinker and do what they need to do on the scheme. And as we've heard from a lot of, was it the cliche that the players kind of tell you who the starting quarterback is? I would not be shocked if over the next 2 weeks of practice, if the team doesn't kind of settle the situation for the coaches at that point, even if it comes to that.
All right. I don't disagree.
I don't have much to say. I just agree.
Same.
I think the coaches, and I think the bye is coming at a great time. You have 2 weeks of film under you. You know what's coming ahead of you. You have 2 weeks. I think this coaching staff will get it together.
Next observation I had coming out this weekend on the positive front, and not to jump ahead to next week, because I'm sure you guys are going to do plenty of preview, but I think we're going to absolutely roll Liberty in 2 weeks based on what I've seen after 2 weeks of the Dukes football.
Yep.
I don't know how I'm not going to say I agree or disagree because I'm a superstitious person, but I'm going to answer it this way. I've never wanted to put a team into the turf like I want us to put it to Liberty. This game to me means so much. If you were to say what's the game circled on this season, it's a toss-up between obviously this and App State for where I want the outcome to go in our favor, but I am both confident in our ability to put on a good performance at Liberty, and I am also very transparent, open, and trying to will that into being. And after yesterday's result, I feel good about what we're going to see when we head up to Lynchburg, but I'm also like, we have to win this game. There's so much at stake. If anything, just for all of our collective online sanity, I will literally just mute the word Liberty going forward after that game, regardless, because it's just overwhelming their fan base and some of the chatter they deliver on social media. So this game means a lot. I am confident in our program and the position we have to make a statement in 2 weeks.
Jacksonville State had over 330 rushing yards on him yesterday. We have 5 running backs and 2 quarterbacks.
We got to hand it off. We have to hand the ball off to our stable running backs.
Yep.
And from a get right situation, and this is something I noted, they only had 1 TFL against Jacksonville State. I was a bit surprised to see that they just got no penetration at the line of scrimmage at all. So I'm really expecting the Duke's offensive line to have an opportunity to really take out some frustration that maybe they got coming out of Louisville on another opponent.
And their quarterback, Ethan Vasco, the transfer from Coastal Carolina, he took some hits yesterday that I'm pretty sure he got up from thinking he was still on a Thursday night in Bridgeforth Stadium. I mean, he got banged up. And
can we put a challenge to JMU Nation? There may be some Liberty fans now who see yesterday's result and go, well, we're not the team we thought we were, and put their tickets on secondary sites. If you are a JMU fan who does not have your tickets to this game in Lynchburg, I know it is technically a sellout right now. If you see tickets on the secondary market, buy it. Let us have as many purple-clad fans as possible in Lynchburg and send a message of who is the #1 program in the state of Virginia. That is a statement that we can all make and all have or at least contribute to making in 2 weeks. As you know, none of us are going to be strapping on the pads, but we can at least be as loud as humanly possible in every way possible to give our team the best chance to come away with a win that is greatly needed.
All right, John, your last slept on it.
My very last thought coming out of the weekend, and this one is really enjoyable considering seeing where we've come and where we are today as a Dukes program. How awesome was the coverage of JMU football and James Madison University as a whole throughout the
Amazing.
pregame, the lead up, the kickoff, the whole broadcast, and even in the postgame and in some of the analysis that happened after the fact. I can't think of a single negative other the jokes about the two quarterback. I can't think of a single negative thing said about JMU throughout that entire broadcast around this game.
Well, can I agree with you in a way of also the negative stuff that was said on the broadcast about us was not about the program. It was that they were even saying, look, this team is the better team. This team should be winning, and they're not because of X, Y, and Z. It was decision-making or execution. And that is such a dramatic contrast from what we've seen a decade ago. It's what we see from other group of 5 teams who go into the game that, they'll frame it or position it as, this team's just hoping to stay in it, or this team is, they don't have the size or the speed to be able to hang with X Power 5 team. They saw us as an equal. They saw the brand of JMU football as something that's deserving of respect, deserving of attention. And I thought that shined through in a massive way. And that matters so much, not just for the national perspective of how JMU is viewed, but again, we talked to in the preseason going into this year with all of these freshman recruits who are now going to make their way to Harrisonburg. And to a person, they all said, I saw JMU on game day. I saw JMU on an ESPN broadcast, and their perception was shaped by that coverage in many ways. And that leads them to being open to those recruiting conversations and the things that will start to happen. So I couldn't agree more that it was a massive win, on top of the fact that now, and I'm not just saying our podcast, but how many other outlets are covering this program, are putting out high quality content. It's really all a rising tide that is leading to so many more eyeballs, both externally on JMU, but in our own fan base, as Taylor has talked about for many, many years, is you have those kind of fans of JMU that are on the periphery, or maybe, athletics isn't their number one focus, but they're people who, tune on to ESPN2 or see it on their social feeds. They're giving this program a second look than maybe they have in the past, and that's leading to the increase in donors, the increase in attendance, and everything that comes with it.
Yeah. Tom Fernelli from CBS Sports, I mean, he said that JMU would be a top-tier ACC team. You had David Pollock get on after the game and talk about how, that this was these two teams were CFP caliber teams. And I think from the national media, all those positive accolades, even after they saw the offensive performance, I think that's what I kind of took away from it, was a lot of the national media saying, ooh, this is not JMU. Not like, oh, look how good they're doing, kind of petting you on the head like you're this small, mid-major, smaller school. I think even they were shocked at some of the things that have made JMU fans frustrated, because even they have gotten to the point where they've elevated the JMU brand and the JMU program to such a high level. So I think all the national media and attention that we got from this game, I felt like we were talked about with respect. I even saw the Louisville accounts that were kind of going back and forth with some of the JMU fans after the game come in and say, put JMU in the ACC. I mean, I think they recognized that it wasn't so much that they had a really bad game, but as our defense was really at a caliber that they probably won't see the rest of the season.
Yeah, and that's before you get into the national new media, for example, the Barstool accounts that the Big Cat, PFT, Evan, the JMU grad who was on the sidelines with Michael, so many other social media brands that cover or live in the college football space, saying positive things about JMU that connects to different audiences than the ESPN broadcast does, and it all leads to more eyeballs, but just more respect. Rightfully given to this program, and I think that's going to continue to pay massive dividends. So, John, any final thoughts before we let you get back to your Sunday and your recovery?
Appreciate that, John. Just that I hope to see what we do next. Last year there was a big pickup from games 2 to 3, going from our FCS opponent into that Chapel Hill game, and then into Ball State following it. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the staff does tweak wise, or maybe they've been holding something back as we've seen in the past. But I can't wait to see what we do out in Lynchburg here in 2 weeks. And
Awesome.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. So thank
John,
you
you were
very much.
great.
Go
And
Dukes.
this is something that is really needed. Again, it's as when we started this podcast, we've always said and are careful to continue to remind us that we're in no different of a position in analyzing this team than fans like you are. We're all just fans who are kind of digesting what happens in real time. And I think this was a good. I love the term of the segment, the slept on it, because I think the perspective that you gain from stepping back a little bit from these moments and looking at the bigger picture is invaluable to defining what goes forward. And your voice was great to this conversation. And we know it's not the last time you're going to share it. So all the best, John. We look forward to seeing you in Lynchburg. And again, I will say to wrap this segment, I'm as optimistic as I was before the season today. I still think every goal that we had at the start of the season is there. I think, Taylor, your point on social media about the analysis around us beating UNC and where we were when we put 70 to what's happening in some of the other Group of 5 teams now. And maybe can you summarize? Yeah, I thought that was such a valuable point.
So, because I do want to put some context, because I think the way I worded the tweet was maybe some people didn't understand what I was trying to say. But, I saw yesterday everyone saying, man, South Florida, they beat Boise. They knocked off Florida. They're running away with it. The American, there's just almost like there's no shot. CFP's already wrapped up. And there's so much of the season left because, again, what I said is, I remember a team that was 3-0, broke a 136-year-old record at UNC and put up the most points ever, was receiving top 25 votes, had people calling Alonzo Barnett, could this guy be getting Heisman consideration? And unfortunately, we ended 9-4 with a bowl victory, but we did not. I mean, we were 4th place in the East in the Sun, but we didn't even compete for a championship last year. So there's still so much of the season left. So these teams that are 1-0, 2-0 have some big wins. There is a lot of football left to be played. Injuries always play a key role. And, we have the way our schedule works out. This bye comes at a great time. We come in, we're going to face Liberty in 2 weeks. Then we come back home and face a Georgia Southern team that has not impressed anyone yet. So we're in a good place. And for me, it's always been, Sun Belt championship or bust. I do think this is a college football playoff caliber program. I do think we should expect to be reaching and striving to get there. But for me, it's Sun Belt championship or bust. And that goal is still very much in front of us, especially as we're about to go over looking at around the Sun Belt. Is still a very winnable conference.
Awesome. All right. Well, John, we'll talk to you soon. See you in Lynchburg and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Go Dukes.
Awesome. All right, Taylor, I know you wanted to rightfully, because I think there were so many things that came out of the college football Saturday that took place yesterday, kind of take us around the country in terms of some of the other action and what impacts it could have on not just JMU, but the college football landscape in general. Sure.
Everyone knows I'm a UTSA homer. They had a really tough game, a shootout with Texas State yesterday. Texas State won 43-36. The takeaway I have from that is I'm telling JMU fans that's a very good UTSA team, and they beat UTSA at home. So that makes my antenna kind of go up a little bit for that Tuesday night game in San Marcos against Texas State later in October.
Yeah, I think that was definitely one that I noticed, and that was going to be a hard game, I thought, in general, when I looked at the schedule even before the season and what we've seen from Texas State. The cross-country travel, a weird dynamic in terms of it being on a Tuesday, but that team seems to be loaded. And it's going to be a big matchup. Is we knew that there were going to be some big games on this schedule. We thought a lot of them would be at home, but that if you asked me to circle what's the hardest game left on this schedule for JMU football, and I would have to pick Texas State.
Then we had the Troy Clemson game that kind of shocked everyone. I know it was 16-3. Someone told me it was 16-0 at one point, I believe. So someone can fact check me on that. But, Clemson ended up winning that game 27-16, kind of scored 27 unanswered points. But Troy did not look great their first game. I think they played Nicholls State. Hanging with Clemson was impressive. I didn't get to watch much of the game. Troy's not a team that's on our schedule this year, but potentially another team to watch in the West if they end up winning that division, and we could face them in the postseason.
Awesome.
Big shocker to me, South Florida. That's the one. Another game I didn't watch.
See the reaction real quick to their coaches after the game.
Did.
I thought that was awesome.
And I saw, as someone who's worked in athletics, I saw there was a woman from the Florida staff who you could tell she's kind of in charge of wrangling the coaches and making sure one coaches go the other way and the other coaches go the other. I just said, man, I can only imagine all the things going through her head in that video there. But South Florida, the way they handled Boise and beating Florida at their place, I mean, it's hard to not. I do agree with everyone. They are clearly the G5 favorite right now, and should be watched. As they go on. NC State pulled off the win over UVA. UVA, that was a pretty competitive game. I don't know how good NC State is. They played a close game with East Carolina. I don't know how good East Carolina is, so it's kind of a wait and see. But I would say UVA is probably meeting expectations right now.
That's
probably not. Then we have we mentioned this earlier, the Jacksonville State Liberty game. Jacksonville State pulling off a 34-24 win there. There were multiple times. If I was a Jacksonville State fan, this game would have really frustrated me, because there were multiple times where they started to pull away by 2 scores, and then Liberty had a big pass or a big run. So Liberty did show the potential to have those big plays and change the game very quickly. But they put up 330 yards of rushing on Liberty. That makes me really excited for the run game that we have coming into their place in 2 weeks. Another game I didn't watch a lot of, but just saw the score. App State 20.
I can be honest with you, I did not know what Lindenwood is. I haven't, to be clear, I haven't even looked up who they are. All I know is from text messages, they're a transitioning team to the FCS level.
From an Ohio Valley Conference, I believe. But
if you ask me to put my life, I couldn't even tell you where they are in the country. I think their mascot, the segments where they go around, they do the schedule reveals. Like, I would be the person like,
yep,
they're the Caesars Sportsbook, the Lindenwood Sportsbooks. I don't even know what they're it's a line.
There may be more to that game, but just looking at the score, not very impressed. But
App State fans were not happy online.
But again, 13-7 Gardner Webb, let's last year. So I'm not going to read too much into it, but it was interesting. Ohio over West Virginia. Virginia traveling to Athens, Ohio. That was a bit of a surprise. I did see some video of Marshall trolling West Virginia and showing the end of that game on their video board. Well played, Marshall, except when you do that, you got to make sure to take care of business at home. And Marshall lost to a transitioning Conference USA school in Missouri State, 21-20. So I'll give Marshall an A+ for the troll, but an F- for finishing out the game and
fair enough,
taking care of business at home. Tulane, South Alabama, 33-31. That was a bit surprising. I did not have South Alabama on my radar really this year, especially with their quarterback transferring to UNC. So was interested to see that score. And South Alabama is a team I'm going to keep an eye on the West. Got 2 more here. Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
I will say that score, if you're a Virginia Tech fan, that score, that game was so much closer than that score was late into the third quarter. But again,
is there a hotter seat in America than Brent Prize right now? I even saw some, not to put this into the ether, I even saw some Virginia Tech fans putting out kind of AI images of Bob Chesney dressed in hokey orange. And I watched with some Virginia Tech fans yesterday, watched the game with them, and they were like, well, we should probably just get JMU's coach. And I'm like, why would he go to a lesser program? But Virginia Tech has not beat a P4 out of conference opponent since 2017. Crazy.
Vanderbilt was the last out of conference P4 on their schedule this year. So that streak will continue into next year. Then the last game of note from this week that I wanted to point out was the 59-20 USC victory over Georgia Southern. Particularly not so much because of the score, 755 yards of offense. USC. I
hear that's a lot
in Georgia Southern.
I'm not about that. That seems like a lot.
I'll say this, with Liberty and Georgia Southern as our next 2 games, and this is where I'm giving a lot of, this is where the glass is very half full in my opinion. I think our coaching staff and the talent that we have on the roster, we have 2 games in front of us where we have the opportunity to really show off what this offense can do and set the tone for the rest of the season. So our schedule is playing in our favor right now. And going back, I forgot, it was North Carolina Central. I didn't have the final score, but I know Old Dominion was 50-something to 3 or whatever. The only reason I point that out is because Old Dominion does travel to Virginia Tech next weekend. That's one of those, I'm probably cheering for Old Dominion because it would be good for the Sun Belt, but it's just like, it's hard to cheer for either of those schools.
Like, if ODU wins that game, is there any way the ACC lets them play another Sun Belt team ever again? That's because I know we have a game coming up with Virginia Tech, at least
next
in theory.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So,
still not convinced that happens, but that's a whole different.
but I'll say, looking around the Sun Belt,
One more really
there
quick.
was,
Coastal Carolina
yep.
was at home, sellout crowd. A lot of focus on Coastal's free concessions promotion. I'll give credit to Coastal. I thought their venue looks outstanding. They did a really cool promotion also where their AD put out a challenge to the students that if somebody came to every one of the Coastal Carolina athletic events for that week, they could lead the team onto the field, and a student took them up on it. Went to, I think, all 19 athletic contests, and got to run out on the field with the team. And I thought that was just an awesome look. But they did struggle in the game, and if you dip your toes in Coastal Carolina Chanticleer Twitter, it was a dark place. They only put up 13 points at home against Charleston. So I say all that for the context of, I think there's a lot of reasons to be very optimistic about JMU's chances in the Sun Belt East, doing what we need to do to put ourselves in the Sun Belt championship game. I came away very pleased with what I saw from this weekend, if that is an ultimate goal for this program, which it should be.
Yeah, and I think, the difference between maybe this year and last year is this last year was more so, with so much of our team gutted through the transfer portal and Coach Signetti leaving, it was kind of like, do we have the personnel and the players in the spots to be successful? I kind of look at it, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, and I tweeted this out. There's no argument we have the talent. We have a talented QB room. We have a talented backfield. We have a talented wide receiver core. I don't have to say we have a talented defense because you saw that on display. The talent is there. So I'd rather have the talent, and we're trying to figure out where the pieces go, versus we have the greatest coaching staff in the world, but it doesn't matter who we put on the field. We do not have players that can compete. We have talent. I would argue maybe on paper, this is probably the best JMU football team on paper. If you're looking from ratings and rankings and experience, this is just one of the most talented football teams we've ever had at JMU. We just need to find how those pieces get put together to go through the season, win the Sun Belt, and hopefully make a shot at the CFP.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts, just Taylor? I have one. I just want to say in general, I understand, and this is not scolding fans. This is not putting down. Everyone is entitled to feel exactly how they want to feel after any of these games. And hey, social media exists for that exact conversation to have the dialogue. I hope people this week take a little bit of a deep breath and take a broader view of where we are. I found myself, as that game unfolded again, just one more time, how things have changed with this program in terms of what our expectations are and the passion that we show. And that is very, very positive. And it's something that kind of fuels the growth of JMU, fuels the people who are watching at view parties. But it is not all of this analysis that's happened after this game, like it is with so many issues, is black and white. It is nuanced. There are so many factors at play here, and just have faith that this staff, based off what they've done, not only their time here at JMU in the past, have the ability to right this ship. Because again, part of the struggles, whoever was at quarterback, and I don't think this is purple color glasses is defining this position, is that was a really, really good team. And I thought Mike's commentary on it, about his perspective as, again, who's somebody who's well-versed in covering the ACC, is so valuable, is because it gives a little bit more context to what we saw. That is a team that will be, I believe at least at the end of the ACC calendar, in that top three group competing for an ACC championship. And we showed well, and that should have fans not pessimistic about the future of this program, very optimistic about what we can do. And don't let the college football playoff, and I said this in a chat that we're on, be your only marker for success. Enjoy each of these games as an individual moment in time. And hopefully at the end of this calendar, we're in position to maybe be a chance at the college football playoff, but don't let be that the only road tool that allows you to define happiness with this season. And that's kind of my final thought.
Yeah, and I completely understand the frustration of the JMU fan base after this game, because unlike the game a few years ago at Louisville when they beat us, was it 34-10?
Yeah.
I walked away from that game. We went into that game very banged up. There's a lot of guys that weren't healthy.
Not healthy, and yeah.
But at the end of the day, we were a transitioning FCS school, and I kind of was just like, look, they were just better. They were bigger. They were stronger. They were faster. And it just wasn't a game, no matter what we did, were we going to compete in. The frustration in this game was, and a lot of our players said it in the press conferences after,
we were better.
We were better. Again, we left 14 points on the board. That first play from scrimmage, the Alston pass, that should have been 7 points. We missed that pick six. So there's
I'll never
14.
forget that pass. I'm going to just be honest. I can't believe we haven't talked about it till now. Like,
Sure.
seeing it from where I was a little higher up in the stadium, it was, I don't think it's possible to be more wide open than that. I can only imagine what that film session is like.
Absolutely.
It has to be gut-wrenching for Alston.
When you think about the 14 points we left on the board there, and then you think about how they scored their other 3 touchdowns, we talked about it, a busted coverage, a bad play, a fumble in the end zone, it's frustrating because we had a chance to beat a top-tier ACC program, a program that is likely going to potentially break into the top 25 this week, if not coming up pretty soon. We had the potential to capitalize on this momentum that we've been building on for the last 3 or 4 years here. So that's the that's what makes it hard.
And I want to be clear, I was as frustrated as anybody after that game. So I don't want to say that I was in a happy mental place.
No. And so that it makes it hard to swallow. And so that's where you got to separate the two. And this is where that binary conversation, it's not one or the other, it's both and it is frustrating on what we missed out on the opportunity to do, because I think we were the better team. But at the same time, John, you said this earlier, everything, and I mean everything we've set out to do is still before us. And we've talked about this going back to the first season of Sound Off. I'm also excited about being in this conference and at this level, because win, lose, or draw, every year I get to play App State. Every year I get to play Old Dominion. Every year I get to play Marshall. Every year we get to compete to go to a bowl game. Every year we get to compete for a conference championship. And yes, we're still in an opportunity to compete for a college football playoff if that opportunity presents itself at the end of the season. So I'm disappointed. I'm frustrated at how the game was on Friday, but everything is in front of us, including in 2 weeks, a game that a lot of JMU fans have been wanting to play for a long time, because to shut that team up, to shut that program up, I don't, there's probably more I could say to just give them more bulletin board material, but it's good that we have a bye week, because I think as a podcast to prepare for how we're going to do next week's show with not letting, it require a parental guidance warning.
Good luck.
We have
how we're going to do it.
Yeah. So
you just got to keep the mic away from Zach Price. I have a feeling that, or maybe we give it to him. I don't know. We'll flush that out this week. I did want to do one housekeeping thing, because we are men of our word. We put it on social media. We love doing giveaways. So why don't we do another giveaway? We asked this week for some people to again, join us on YouTube, show us that you support the program. And we picked 5 winners to receive their very own fashionable Sound Off tumbler right here.
That's a nice tumbler. That's a nice tumbler.
Like laser engraved. They're sharp. Here are our 5 winners. Again, we put it into a randomizer. Everyone that follows the account. We've got Jonathan Legendre. Hope I said that right. Alan Leffers, Diego Perez, friend of the show, Chris Ward wins the cup this week. Yeah, he's going to get Chris Ward, the randomizer selects you. Congratulations. And then Steve Washburn. These are our 5 fans. So I'm going to be sending direct messages. With YouTube, it's a little wonky, so I'm going to have to try to get you a message. But if for some reason I can't get a message to you and you see this broadcast, or anybody on us, send us an email, JMU Sound Off at gmail.com. Send us a direct message with your address. We will ship you out a mug, or we'll drop it off to you at one of the games to come. So we've got a bunch of these coming up every week. We're going to try to do something, and this is just our way of saying thank you. Again, our show is great because of your support, your engagement, your passion, and we are never going to take it for granted, and we're going to continue to say thank you as much as we can. Taylor, this was a great episode. To John Butler, to Mike Barber, that for me personally is just a conversation for the ages. I just respect him so much. It was great to have him on, and he has said to us anytime we want him on in the future, the answer is yes. So I'm sure we'll take advantage of his services. And to everyone in JMU Nation, enjoy the rest. To the players who watch this show, to the coaches, we're still behind you guys 100%. Keep up the effort, because we know we're just getting started on the marathon that is this season. And as always, to the fans of JMU Sound Off in this program, go Dukes. We will talk to you soon. Enjoy the week. Enjoy the slate of NFL games as well. And we'll talk to you soon.